statement. It's obviously like everybody else, excited about a new year, opportunity to get back together and see what this program can continue to become under our leadership. And I'm excited that we got a pretty veteran group, guys who've been around the block a little bit, and several of which been around the block with us. And so, looking forward to just getting through these, next 6 weeks of practice, 7 weeks of practice before we tip it off and hit the ground running.
Mike, this may not be the best place to start, but you reacted to the Memphis stuff today. Kind of what's your reaction
Memphis stuff?
to the, yeah.
I'm just kidding. Listen, I first and foremost, I am a Penny Hardaway fan. I'm a basketball fan, so I've always admired Penny, and we've actually become good friends. So in no way was, and I hope it wasn't taken this way, it's some sort of slight at them. Mm-hmm. I'm actually happy for their kids that they don't have to endure, the agony of going through what we went through. Doesn't make it any less frustrating. I'm glad it's behind us though, and looking forward to just kind of moving forward.
Is there relief this year that you go in knowing that you've moved past that in some ways? Not
Yeah.
entirely,
I mean,
but...
and I think talked about it at the end of last year. That kind of, unfortunately, the way it ended, but that kind of signified that part of it being over. And so, just kind of, trying to be as focused on the guys we have now and what we can accomplish with this group, this particular year, but also continue to build, a constant and continuous successful program here in Stillwater.
It doesn't really matter too much at this point, but has there been any discussions on the scholarship shanks? I can't ever say that together. Sanctions on scholarships because of how things are kind of changing. It seems like over on that end.
I don't know. I haven't had any of those conversations. Kind of leave some of that stuff to the people above me in administration to deal with. Just kind of, from a day-to-day basis, do the best we can with what we know we have. And what we know we have now is, we've got 11 guys on scholarship and 4 walk-ons, and like I said, a fairly experienced group of guys who are really excited about what they can do this year together.
Now that it's back on the table, how much motivation are you taking from having everything, March Madness, National Championship, all that in the cards? Is it easier to wake up in the morning, or do you use it to motivate your team?
I've never had an issue sleeping. I don't sleep often, but sleep has never really been a problem for me. What I'll say about the opportunity to participate in postseason this year is it's always a part of the goal, right? And we want that to be the expectation. And we know this league is hard, but there's also a lot of opportunities there to show that you are one of those teams that's deserving. So, we'll go through the non-conference and try to get better like we always do, and hopefully be prepared to play our best basketball once the calendar turns to conference play.
The guys were talking about how competitive practice has been, the workouts, and then now the official practices. How versatile can you see this team being in maybe 6, 7, 8 different guys that could be in the starting lineup on any given night?
Yeah, we'll have the ability, I believe, from what I've seen so far, to play different styles, and I haven't made a secret about it. You guys will see us. Maybe some of you will stick around and watch a little bit of practice. We've worked a lot with Caleb and Musa, and some combination of the 3 bigs we have, Caleb, Musa, and Tyreek, playing together.
Yeah.
One of the reasons is they've learned how to play together. The other is kind of out of necessity. We're not as long on the perimeter as we have been in the past. We're a little bit shorter. We talk about John Michael versus Isaac Likely, right? Not the wingspan. He's really tough, athletic, but he's 6 foot, so we'll have to look a little bit different in terms of being able to still be competitive on the glass. The other thing, from a positive standpoint, it gives us the 2 best shot blockers in the Big 12 on the court at the same time. So a team that was already pretty stout defensively can be, maybe go from 4 in the country to a little higher. But I also think that this team shoots it better, and the early returns on that are very favorable for us.
When you do go more 3 guard, more small, how big is the mix of guys there? Because, I mean, we've heard a lot about Q. The guys bragged about Q.
Yeah.
Obviously, you mentioned John Michael, Avery, Bryce,
Caleb
Chris,
Asbury,
Chris
Harris,
being back.
yeah,
I mean,
Woody Newton.
it's a lot of dudes.
Yeah. Depth is certainly an asset for us. You know, but the experience of depth, like guys who have been successful in college basketball already. And John Michael Wright averaged 18 points a game for 3 years. You know, he didn't just jump up and decide he wanted to play here. He's proven that he can compete at a high level. Caleb Asbury was a 40% three-point shooter. You know, in each of the last stops he's made, Texas State, Ranger College, playing for some really good coaches, and himself averaging 13 points a game in a conference that's pretty good. So, you know, you feel good you got guys who've done it outside of your program, and then there's some guys who haven't quite done it here that we believe, you know, we brought them here. We believe they can. Chris Harris has been hurt essentially for his whole time.
Yeah.
Woody Newton didn't never really get comfortable last year. He's had a really good summer, and then, you know, Keon may be, you know, maybe a guy who figures out a way to get on the court early. Even though he's the only freshman we have, he's got a super high competitive motor. He can play multiple positions and guard multiple guys. And then you got your mainstays in Avery and Bryce and guys like that. So I feel good that that'll drive some fight for minutes early and give us a chance to really see, you know, how deep we can be.
What kind of addition is John Michael? What have you seen from him? I know you were looking for a point guard.
Yeah.
Is that what he answers there? Is that
Yeah, I mean, probably more than I thought in terms of his feel for the game. The hardest part about recruiting through the portal is you don't really get to know them as people, and it's the thing we always took a lot of pride in throughout the recruiting process, and recruiting guys early and getting on them and getting to know as much as you could about them. And so you're always a little bit leery about, you know, are there things that you didn't uncover that may show up? And he's been better than, you know, I hoped in terms of tremendously high character, super competitive, great teammate, a guy who understands that even though he averaged 18 points a game, he's not going to be necessarily asked to average 18 points a game here. He's going to be asked to be more facilitating minded and allow Bryce and Avery to probably carry the load from a scoring on perimeter standpoint. And he's embraced that. He's excited about the opportunity to play at this level and show that he can be successful. And he just got to continue to figure out how to be more vocal. You know, I think he's kind of taking a little bit of a backseat to those other guys in that regard, but he'll be just fine.
Is Caleb Boone natural at the four? How's he kind of adjusting to that?
He's actually got some natural shooting touch there. Sometimes the ball handling, you know, escapes him. So we try not to put him in too many positions where he has to make plays with the ball on the floor on the perimeter. But he's really good in screens. He's actually a better rebounder offensively from there. He's not battling as many bodies. And so that's been a positive kind of I don't know if surprise. I kind of knew it was possible, but just seeing him embrace that has been really good. And the other thing is him and Musa learning how to pass to one another, you know, which is a little bit different for them because they didn't play that much together last year.
And you mentioned you kind of lost some length with no Keelan, with Russ's situation.
Mm-hmm.
How important does that then make Woody's kind of the last stretch forward you kind of have?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a great opportunity there for him. You know, he's got a lot of talent, and sometimes he's in his own way, not in a bad way. He's just, you know, he's got to learn how to assert himself more consistently and play with a higher motor, you know, and a more consistent level of energy, because he can shoot. He's got a pretty good feel for when to cut and how to space the floor, and he can rebound the ball. But again, at this level, it's about not what you can do, but what you do consistently to help your team. And consistency is the thing that's really, really key for him moving forward.
How have you seen Caleb adjust to not having Keelan around?
You know, it's probably unfair for me to say how he is. You know, it's probably more of a personal question. I don't know if you had an opportunity to ask him, but from a basketball standpoint, he hasn't been much different. just knowing them, I do think that there was a sense of responsibility he felt, while Keelan was here, that maybe he doesn't necessarily feel now. So that may take a little bit of external pressure off him. But as far as basketball, it really hasn't been that much.
Is Chris a welcome sight for you to see back as
Yeah.
well too? I mean, considering everything he's gone through.
Yeah. I mean, Chris is a welcome sight because he's a good player, and because as a fourth-year guy now, he knows what I expect. He can own the conversation in the locker room. Him and Avery and Caleb, those guys have been with me here for a while, and gone through a lot as freshmen. None of them were really that ready to play. Chris probably was the most physically ready of all of them, and then obviously got hurt middle of the year that year, and then never came back from the sophomore year injury. So it's great to have him back, to see him happy and feeling healthy. He's in the best shape that he's ever been in. He lost about 22 pounds this summer, which was a big part of him being able to sustain some ability to play. And so it's good to have him because, like I said, you can't replace that experience. Last few years we've been fairly young, in terms of playing a lot of guys who hadn't had a whole lot of experience in college basketball, and this year we don't have that issue.
You've been in search of three-point shooting, and it's no secret. Is he kind of a stealth addition, maybe, to some people that got a guy like Chris that can shoot?
Yeah. I mean, he's he kind of gets lost in the conversation because he's not a new guy, and no one's really seen him produce consistently yet. But he's a guy that we should be able to count on, to be a shot maker for us. But make no mistake about it, Avery Anderson and Bryce Thompson, those guys are where it starts. Their numbers from three-point stance have to continue to improve because, we're going to go offensively probably as far as those guys really take us, those two and Caleb Boone.
It seemed like in the portal you tried to build around Bryce, Avery, Musa, obviously at three. That kind of seems like the first time that you've had to do that, is build around pieces that you've already had. How did you kind of go about doing that in the portal this year? And you mentioned not being able to get to know the guys. How'd that go?
The first thing, I had to make sure they were all coming back to school.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was the first part. I spent the first probably 3 weeks of the off season just visiting with them about where they were. And obviously Avery went through the draft process. We got some information for Musa. He didn't go through the draft process. And then obviously, Bryce had started to come on. So that was the first part, is getting them back. And, especially with today's landscape, the opportunities are endless for them. Sometimes not always the best for them, but they're out there. And so once you get them back, then it's about helping them understand how they can be effective together, and that they need each other, and that then the pieces around them have to fit, right? And so you got to have some more rebounding. And we didn't necessarily address that from a big standpoint, but it was the first time in my coaching career that I wasn't out on a recruiting trail in the spring looking for size. You're almost always looking for some inside presence, but we got 3 guys who can all play the 5, who are pretty good together, and so that was an advantage going into the spring, so we could really focus on those backcourt spots.
What's different about Musa last year and Musa now?
Maturity. I think in many ways he came in here and felt a lot of pressure. The guy's a 5-star coming in, that kind of creates a certain expectation from the outside about what you should do, what you should look like. But he just turned 20 years old a couple weeks ago. He's been in college 3 years. So when he gets to college at 17, over 2 years ago, he's not ready to do anything that people said he was going to do. But he didn't understand that. And so he had some success, probably didn't appreciate his success that he had at Memphis. And then so when he transfers, then it's like, well, now you really have to be the best big in the country. He's not ready to do anything. He's only 18 years old still. So he gets here, and it's a new environment, and he got here late because he was in the draft and had to finish up summer school. And again, it took a little while. And then, last year's team had a lot of dynamics, and then we got the postseason ban right before the season starts. His mom passes during the year. I mean, it's just so, I think there's a sense of peace that he has now. He probably left Stillwater 3 times thinking he would be gone from Stillwater for weeks, and he wound up coming back within days. And I think he feels at home now. And so I think that's a very positive thing, that he's comfortable, he likes where he is, he feels like he's getting better. and I don't think he's focused on what's next anymore. I think he's really settled on trying to be the best he can today.
You talk about having to rely on Bryce and Avery. With some of his flashes last year, how good can Bryce be this year?
So Bryce probably had as good a summer of anybody I've been around in terms of really understanding how to be himself. Bryce, in many ways, looks different, but had a similar experience to Musa. Down was American, it's basketball in the state, he goes away to blue blood, doesn't have the success, comes home, and the expectations probably for him to a new environment, new teammates, and all that, probably a little bit out of whack. But again, the kids can't accept that. It's a mental game for him. But again, him too, he's settled. He had a tremendous summer. I think he trimmed down about 4% off his body fat. He's playing with a lot of confidence. And I think he's back to being the confident basketball player that he was in high school, but with an understanding how to do it at the college level.
With those transfers, is there anything you've learned over the years on helping them get up to speed and being contributors early? I mean, you said Musa, he wasn't playing well later in the year. Bryce, same way. Is there anything you've learned over the years to get them?
It's hard. It's hard to really kind of give a general, just because each situation is so different. So my first year, for instance, we got a transfer, but we only needed one transfer. We lost Juwan Evans. We needed a point guard. So we had to bring a kid in there and he had to play. So Kendall Smith had an unbelievable experience because he was coming from Cal State Northridge and he was a starting point guard in the Big 12 all of a sudden. And so his experience was a very positive one. We've had some other guys, quite honestly, who didn't fit because it didn't work as immediately for them. And so, with these guys who have embraced taking a little bit longer, they've been able to find themselves and accepting that, there's still opportunities to grow there.
With the COVID year, I tried to count the other day, and you have somewhere between 2 and 10 scholarships available for next year.
Yes.
How do you go about?
I don't talk about it.
You just don't.
No, I think about it obviously because I want to prepare, but it's an impossible exercise. I'll tell you guys again. I'm always fairly honest. Musa Cisse will probably not be back in college next year. I don't think, but he's got 2 years of eligibility left. All right, Bryce Thompson, if he has the type of year that I hope he has, he's probably at least going through the process next spring. Avery Anderson, Caleb Boone, Chris Harris, Tyreek Smith, who's going to graduate still with 2 years. We got 6 guys who all could be gone. And if they are, this team's going to look very different next year. Caleb Asbury's he's in his COVID year, so that's it for him. Bernie Kuma's in his COVID year, so that's it for him. So now you're at 8. I don't know. John Michael's got 2 years, but he's already so it's like, what do? You just try to sign as many good players as you can and figure it out next year when the time comes.
So there's not a number that I know you can't get into specifics, but there's not a number that you're comfortable with having in this class right now. You're just kind of going as it goes.
It's hard turning down good players. And credit to our staff. They've done a tremendous job here early in identifying guys who we think can fit in what we're trying to build here in the future. And they asked the question, and again, I have to answer it, and ultimately I'm responsible for it. I know that there's a limit of scholarships we have to be at by next fall. We won't be over it.
Do you ask those guys to constantly give you an update with what they're thinking? Or is that impossible?
The kids?
Yeah, is that impossible?
Yeah, it's probably unfair, to be honest. It probably, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know. I'll be honest, and I don't usually talk about him, but I think Lon Kruger, and this is before all this stuff happened. When Trae Young came to campus, they weren't thinking he was going to go, and all of a sudden the kid's averaging 30 points and 10 assists, and he ain't coming back to college. And so some of it just kind of happens over the natural course of the season. And so, as we get closer to the end, there'll be an idea. You'll have a feel for it, and then our staff will have to be ready to adapt.
So, Mike, with that.